Welcome to the Community Health Team Live's Facebook session. This is our second week of doing Facebook Live. I hope you joined us last week, and if you did, you will know that we were trying to encourage you to get out walking. So we'd be interested to find out if you did any walking from last week. So if you did, please send us a message. For those that don't know who I am, I'm Alison Connor. I'm a community health worker with the Community Health Team, and I have with me today
I'm Ria. I'm also a community health worker with the Community Health Team.
And we've also got our colleague Robin behind the camera, and he's going to be telling us if you could pass on any comments or that, he'll relay them to us. So please do. This has got to be quite an interactive session, and we really like when you get in touch with us. So what we're going to do today is give you some tips that we think would help for a healthy lifestyle, and would encourage you guys as well to send in your tips for us as well. So we're just going to go through certain things that we feel that can maybe help you lead a healthier lifestyle. So I'm just going to hand you over to Ria, who's going to give you tip number 1.
So the first thing that we'd like to mention is basing your meals on starchy foods. So if you have a think about the foods that you tend to eat throughout the day, about a third of all the food that you eat should be starchy carbohydrates. And Alison's actually brought some examples of some of the things that we're going to speak about today. So your carbohydrates are things like your pastas, we've got some spaghetti here, we've got noodles, we've got some rice, so that's also included, things like your bread and your breakfast cereals, and also your potatoes as well. So these are all included in the carbohydrate group. So as I say, just over a third of your food should be from that group, and that's because they're your main source of energy. You also get other benefits from making sure that you've got a good source of carbohydrates in your diet. So it's good for helping your brain function. You get B vitamins from your carbohydrates as well, which are sometimes really difficult to get in your diet. It helps prevent things like infections, helps your body fight off infections and illnesses. And the other thing that you can do to help is go for your whole grain or brown options. So go for your brown breads, your seeded breads, your whole wheat pastas. So if you have a look when you're in the supermarket, you'll see that there are brown versions of things like your rice as well. Any whole grain cereals and things that you can go for. And that's because they're higher in fibre. So they're really, really good for keeping your bowels nice and healthy as well, and also help you feel fuller for longer, which means that you're less likely to snack and you're less likely to eat more than you should be eating as well. So it's good for maintaining a healthy weight as well.
Okay. Thank you, Ria. Just to add on to that about the carbohydrates, sometimes carbohydrates get a bad press from people. People will say, I'm not going to be eating carbohydrates to put weight on. Well, I think Ria and I will probably like to get the message across. It's not actually your carbohydrate that's the enemy, it's what you're going to add to it. So if you're going to have a baked potato and put lashings of cheese, lashings of coleslaw that's got full fat mayonnaise, etc., that's what the guilty food is. It's not actually your humble carbohydrate. Same if you're making spaghetti bolognese or something like that. Ria's got a jar of tomato-based sauce there that's probably better than having your heavily laden creamy sauces.
Yeah, I think it can be deceiving. A lot of the sort of fad diets and things that people hear about are telling people not to eat carbohydrates. But if I had a pound of carbohydrate in one hand and a pound of fat in the other, you'd actually get less calories from the carbohydrate, although I've got the exact same amount in each hand. So a lot of people think that they'll put on lots and lots of weight if they eat lots of carbohydrates, but like I say, it's actually a third of your food that should be carbohydrate based.
Okay, so that was a tip there. Thank you, Ria. That was all about our carbohydrates, so hopefully we've got the information that we need about that. But please do send in a question or a comment if you would like more information. I'm going to give you another tip, and this is one of my favourite tips because without this tip we wouldn't last very long. It's all about drinking plenty of water. So I've got my water bottle here. I'm a great advocate of opening this humble container, going to my tap in the kitchen and turning the tap on, put the lid back on, take it away with me for the day, and I've got really good water. I know some people like to buy bottled water, but again, Scottish water is probably the best water that you can get in the world, so please think about getting a container that you can use time and time again. Now you might say, well, how much water do I need to be drinking? Well, the rule of thumb is it's 6 glasses, or if you want me to talk about litres, it's 1.5 to 2 litres. Now the important thing about water is that you'll quickly dehydrate, and dehydration is a serious condition. And I'd like to ask you all, have you ever felt thirsty? And if you can answer that, yes, I have at times felt thirsty, I would say to you, you've got a problem then, because you're in the early stages of dehydration. You should never feel thirsty, so that is why it is really important to always have water with you. Make sure that you've got a bottle with you. It doesn't have to be a big container like that, you can have a smaller one, but always have water. If you're not hydrated enough, you lose a lot of concentration. And if you think about kids in schools now, they are encouraged to every day bring in their bottle of water. So there's teachers actually telling their children, please bring your bottles of water in, because they know that it improves their performance. So I'm here to talk to you, all adults. Let's improve our performance. Let's have lots of water. Ria, do you want to add anything to the water?
I don't think so.
No.
Just making sure you've got it with you all the time, like Alison says, make it as easy as possible to incorporate it into your daily routine, so that you are likely to maintain that, and keep drinking.
What would you say for people who say they don't really like water?
Okay, right, some people will say they don't like water. What about trying something else then? What about diluting the water with maybe a little squeeze of lemon juice or a tiny bit of orange juice, something like that? We're really trying hard to get people away from the fizzy drink culture, because if I was to put a can of fizzy juice here, no brand names will be mentioned, but a lot of the popular juices that we've got in cans, if I was to talk to you about the amount of sugar there's in them, you might have a bit of a shock. Now the good thing about water is there's loads of benefits for water. We've talked about it hydrates you, but with water, do you know how many calories is in water? 0. Do you know how much fat is in water? 0. Do you know how much sugar is in water? 0. What's not to like about this humble liquid that is a life-saving, fluid? So it really is important to try and get your fluids up. And I know I've heard it time and time again that people say, oh, I can't drink water. Just try and have something else then. Just dilute it with a little bit of something that you fancy, but not overly diluting it.
So we've got just one question popped up just now from Christina. So she's asking, she said she's with NHS Tayside Adult Weight Management Programme and is on the surgery list for gastric bypass surgery, and wondered if you have any tips for her regarding what foods you think would be better for eating less calories.
When we're talking about eating less calories, I know losing weight is a very difficult thing to do, and it's difficult, but we know what we should be doing. And losing weight it's a simple sort of philosophy. Eat less than what you're burning off. So your calorie intake, if you make it less than what you're burning off, if you're going to eat more calories and you don't burn them off, you're going to put weight on. So whatever you eat, whether it be an orange, whether it be a banana, whether it be a fish supper, you've got to burn it off. So it's a case of trying to do more exercise, which I know can be difficult for some people, but I'll give you a little demonstration just later on in this session about what you can do sitting on a chair, and that might give you some inspiration and some ideas and tips of what you can do to try and lead a healthier lifestyle.
There's one more question just popped up, is that okay?
Yeah.
So this one's from Michael, who's just asking how much squash would you recommend putting into water. I fill a bottle 3/4 full with water and 1/4 of squash. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. My rule of thumb is usually it's 1/10 juice, 9/10 of the water. So if you can, I'll maybe take you to a wee scenario. It can be difficult to just drink water, but if you're adding juice to it, try what some people do with their teas and coffees. Probably if I was to ask you all, when you used to have tea and coffee, how much sugar did you used to put in? And most people will say, I used to have about 3 or 4 sugars. But you're now not having any sugar. How did you manage that? And most people will say, well, I went from 4 teaspoons of sugar in my tea to 3, to 2, to 1.5. and I got down to 1 teaspoon, and then I got down to a half a teaspoon of sugar, and then I decided maybe I could go even lower. So gradually reduce it. I think when you do things, you know, from drinking juice that's maybe got, you know, half and half in it, for instance, half water, half juice, it would be difficult to go right down to 1 to 10. So what you do is just decrease it slightly, and you probably won't even notice. So that's a tip I would give you, and you might, just might, get down to just drinking water on its own without anything added to it at all. That's the aim. Right, is that enough for water? Because I can go back to any subject. Please feel free to ask Ria and I again any more questions. We can go back to them. But I think Ria's going to do the next session.
Yep. So the next one I'm just going to talk about is eating more fish. So if you don't include fish in your diet and it's something that you might quite like, the aim is to have maybe about 2 to 3 portions of fish each week. And at least one of those portions should be an oily fish. Now I've got some examples of the oily fish just noted down here because I only ever remember 2 or 3 of them. So we're talking about things like mackerel, herring, tuna, sardines, trout, salmon. There are a few others. You can have a wee look online if you want a full list of those. So there are many health benefits associated with including oily fish in your diet. So you're talking about things like lowering your risk of heart disease. They're a great source of protein. Fish is a good source of protein, and it's a lean source. So it's not got any of those saturated fats in it that you might find in other sources of protein like your red meats and things like that. So it's a healthier meat option to go for. And whether it's canned or frozen or fresh, they're all really good sources of the good fats, which I'm going to mention in a little while. So while we're trying to get away from the saturated fat, which is the kind that's associated with all the sort of health conditions that people have, you know, to do with their heart and obesity and their blood pressure, we are trying to encourage people to make sure they are including a little bit of fat in their diet, and that's the unsaturated fats, or what we would call the good fats. So you do get that from including fish in your diet. So if you enjoy fish, that's great. If you're not so keen or you're not sure, give one of them a wee try, see what you might like or not. You might like one and not the others. So if you can, give it a go if you've never really included fish in your diet before, and see how you go with that.
Okay, thanks Ria. I'm going to talk to you now about getting active and trying to be a healthy weight. Now it's probably been very difficult to keep as active as you would have liked during the recent months, because we've been in lockdown and it's been quite restrictive. And just going back to last week's session, we're talking about getting out and walking. Now I'm understanding and I appreciate that not everybody can get outside at the moment, so maybe it's time to think about what we can do indoors. So I brought along a set of weights today, and using weights is a great way, just to get the muscles, the arms toned up. They can be used, as a hammer curl. We can do bicep curls, we could do a shoulder press, we can move on to do a lateral raise. All these exercises, you don't need to bust a gut to do them, but doing them in small amounts, small reps, but doing them often throughout the day. And I know you might be saying, oh look, there's Alison, she's got a set of weights, she's really lucky she's got weights. Worry ye not. If you don't have weights, get into the cupboards, and what have you got in your cupboards? Have you got a couple of tins? If you've got a couple of tins, what about, you could be sitting. I'll sit down just so as I can demonstrate that you don't need to be standing up to do exercises. It'll actually burn more calories if you're standing up though, because you're actually putting a little bit more pressure on the legs. And if you're able to, do some arm raises just like this, you can lift your knees up at the same time, so that's just adding a little bit onto it. Physical activity, it's something that I could talk about all day, every day, because the benefits, not just physically from physical activity, the benefits mentally are really good as well. I know if I go out for a walk, or if I do a session with the weights I've got there, or if I go out on my bike, I feel great when I come back. But probably the same issue, I have to persuade myself to get out. I've got to persuade myself to pick these weights up. I've got to persuade myself to go in and get the bike out, get my safety helmet on and go, do I really want to go out? But once I've been out and come back, it's absolutely fantastic. So give it a try. Try and have that conversation with yourself about doing some physical activity. We know the benefits mentally. but medically as well, we spoke about this last week. Increasing your physical activity can reduce your risk of certain cancers, reduce your risk of getting certain, other conditions, strokes, etc. So try really hard to push yourself if you can. If you find it difficult, try and buddy up with someone. That was something we mentioned last week as well. Having someone that, can motivate you to go out, and you can maybe motivate them when they're not quite feeling up to it. So physical activity, really a great thing to be doing. Ria, do you want to add in to physical activity?
No, just reiterating what you've said, and I think any activity is better than none. So if you know that you tend to sit down or lie down for long periods at maybe a certain time of day, just try and break it up a wee bit with a little bit of movement. I know we get told that we have to do things like 2.5 hours a week, or there's various recommendations and things, but anything is better than nothing. And things like gardening and anything that means that you're on the move, it all counts as well.
So we've just got a question, but it's related to the water again. So are flavoured waters okay, or should I just keep to fresh or plain bottled water?
My advice would be, again, get yourself a container and just turn on the tap and fill up your container. You've got your water with you all day, and if you run out of water, there's various places you can maybe fill it up again. Flavoured water's okay, but please check what's added to it. It sometimes will say no added sugar, but just have a check, because sugar comes in lots of different guises, and I think Ria's going to talk about that later on. There's numerous names for sugar, it's not always listed, so you might be fooled into thinking you're having a really healthy drink, when in fact there might be a lot of additives that aren't as good as good old water from that tap. Okay, so I think Ria's going to talk about the next one.
Yep, so the next one, it relates a little bit to some of the other things that we've spoken about. So it's to do with cutting down on your fat intake and your sugar intake. So I've mentioned already, and I think Alison's mentioned as well, things like your heart disease, obesity, problems with your teeth, high blood pressure. They're all linked to however much fat and sugar you might have in your diet, or at least they can be. So making sure that you reduce your amounts of fat and sugar will mean that you're reducing your risk of any of these kinds of health problems. So as I mentioned earlier on, we're talking about reducing our saturated fat. So in a nutshell, that's the kind of fat that you'll find in a lot of the foods that we really love to eat, but we know we maybe shouldn't eat quite so much of them. So things like your cheese, your butter, your meat products, pastries, cakes, ice cream, all the good stuff. So what we would say is just to have these things in moderation. We're not saying for 1 minute that you could cut all of that out and never eat it at all, but it's just being mindful of how much of that or how often that you're eating it. And same with the sugar as well. If you can, go for your low sugar or low fat options. So if you're buying things like yogurts or your dairy products, there's lots of products that have low fat and low sugar options now. So if you have a wee look, and if you can, go for them. When you are selecting things in the supermarket like your meat products, go for lean cuts of meat if you can. If you see any meat on see any fat on the meat that you're cooking, remove it, cut it off, trim off as much as you can, and be mindful of the way that you're cooking as well. So try to grill your foods, bake it in the oven, rather than frying or adding more oil. A lot of the time when you're cooking with oil, you're actually adding more fat into your diet. So just be mindful of that as well. If you can dry fry, or you get the bottles of spray oil now for frying as well. So a wee scoosh of that is a lot better than sort of free pouring oil into a pan when you're cooking as well. And as Alison mentioned, there's a wee bit there about reading your labels. So if you're not used to reading your food labels, when you're buying your foods, definitely have a look at the ingredients, have a look at the front of the packet. A lot of labels have the traffic light system, so it'll give you some information about the fat, the sugar, the salt content, and whether it's green, orange or red. So even if you're not sure about the number that it has on there, you get an idea from whether it's green, orange or red as to whether it's healthier or not so healthy. Is there anything else I've missed out?
Maybe just the types of meat to be eaten, the leaner ones.
Yeah, so
your poultry.
I've mentioned fish earlier on, so things like your chicken, if you can go for things like the white meat, so that's your chicken breasts. I've mentioned fish. If you can go for plant-based options, that's even better. If you want to reduce the amount of meat that you're eating, you can go for other things. So I talked a little bit earlier on about the unsaturated fats. So your body actually needs fat. You don't want to cut it out completely. So if you're going to get fat, you want to get it from the foods that will give you the good fat. So we're talking about things like nuts, seeds, avocados, olives. Can you think of anything else?
No, you're doing great.
I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I've not got anything written down, so I'm not actually sure. So yeah, so just anything kind of plant-based that you can get a source. You've got a source of fat there that isn't an animal product. You'll get your unsaturated fat from that. So as I said, your body does need fat. You need it to keep your energy levels up. You need it to keep your mood kind of on kilter as well. Sort of the bodily processes and functions and things that take place in your body that all need a little bit of fat, and you need fat to absorb your vitamins and minerals from your foods as well. So it's not a case of cutting it out completely. Sorry, I'm rambling.
Got a question. So Christina is asking, are red meats okay, or should I avoid red meat? My guilty pleasure is I like to have sausages and burgers every so often.
So again, if you have a wee look at the packet, nowadays when you get things like your burgers and your mince and things in the chilled cabinets in the supermarket, they'll usually say contains 5% fat, contains 15% fat. Go for your lowest fat option. If it's something that you really want to have, go for the lowest fat option that you can find. You can also tell by looking at it, the appearance actually changes. So if you look at a packet of mince that has 5% fat, and then you look at a packet that might have 20 or 25% fat, you can tell by looking at them, you can visibly see the fat, and sometimes that will make me think, no, actually I'm not going for that one, I'm going to go for this one. If you are frying burgers and mince and things, if you really must do it, drain off as much fat as you can, drain it off into a container or into a jar and dispose of it. And as I say, if you can grill, if you've got a grill at home or something like a George Foreman, you can cook it in a healthier way as well. Or you can make your own burgers and things from mince, and you can flavour them with herbs and spices and things if you wanted to. And that way you kind of know what's in the food as well, because you've done it yourself.
Would you, so this is a question sort of for me then to build on to this, so would you say that it's a good idea to try to maybe limit your red meat intake, just since people are, a lot of evidence around sort of cancer risk and especially processed meats, and would it be a good idea to cut them out a little bit?
Definitely. When it comes to things like your ready meals and your pre-packaged foods or your processed foods, you really want to limit them as much as you possibly can. It depends what it is that you're doing, it depends what your lifestyle's like. It's so handy to have something in the freezer or the fridge that you know on a busy day you can just shove in the microwave or shove in the oven, and everyone's the same. You know, there's got to be a balance between what's convenient and doable for you, and what's healthy and good for you as well. So it's getting that balance, that's definitely important. If you feel that you maybe eat, you know, if the only kind of meat that you eat is a red meat, maybe just, as Alison says, it's about a gradual reduction of that. Swap a couple of portions of your red meat out for something else, and whether that's fish or chicken, or plant-based, you know, there's loads of corn products and things just now in the supermarkets, lots of vegetarian sausages, burgers, and they're all really good sources of protein, but they don't contain the same fat. So it's just getting that balance. Is that okay?
Cool.
A particular subject that's a favourite of mine, I run a healthy lifestyle group, or I was doing before lockdown, and they all know that two of the favourite things I like to talk about is getting plenty of water and eating your breakfast. Now, I'm not wanting to be ageist here, but when I usually have anybody in my group that's 35 and under, it has been noted that they're not a big fan of eating breakfast, so I don't know if it's an age thing, but but most of the 35 and overs are really good at having their breakfast. And it is so important to eat your breakfast in the morning because you need to fuel the body. You need to, be ready to take on whatever the day's going to throw at you. And I kind of liken it to a car. Now, if you've got a car, you've got to fuel that car. You've got to make sure it's got oil, it's got water, it's got petrol, diesel, whatever, electricity, whatever your car runs on. So you're fueling your car, so you must fuel your body. So making sure you have your breakfast in the morning is a great way also to start your metabolism. And if you don't have breakfast in the morning and you say, maybe you have your lunch or something at 12, what you've done is you've actually put your body into a bit of a starvation mode, because the body's saying to you, when is she going to feed me? Because I haven't had anything, I've been up for 4 hours, I wonder what's happening, I'll better conserve my fat stores here. So if you're looking to lose weight, it's not a good idea to skip breakfast. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and if there's anybody out there who's watching today or watching it later on this session, if you've got children or if you've got a pet, would you ever deny them food in the morning? And I bet you would answer, oh no, my cats get up and I can hear them wailing, my dog gets up, he needs his food, or my children, I would never dream of sending them to school without breakfast. Well, be kind to yourself, give yourself breakfast as well, because that's what you need to get your metabolic rate started, that's what you need to fuel your body, and that's what you need, as I said earlier, to face whatever's coming during the day. And the other thing that might happen is, if you don't have breakfast before you go out for the day, you might have severe hunger pangs around 11 o'clock maybe, whatever time it is. You will then not have your best head on to decide what you should be eating. You will go for what's quick, fast and ready to eat. And that's going to be things like crisps, a biscuit, a cake, something that doesn't need any preparation. So that's a danger. That's why it is really important to have your breakfast. A good healthy breakfast in the morning is something that I would highly recommend. So please, if you're looking to lose weight, eat your breakfast.
So I've got one question come up here, and I've got a question as well. So in terms of eating breakfast, what tips would you give to people who are maybe in a rush in the morning, so parents trying to get their kids ready for school, trying to get out the door as quickly as possible, or people trying to get to work and they just don't have time to make breakfast and they just are in a bit of a rush? What would you say to them?
Right, well, there's a thing called preparation and being prepared. So if you know that things are very hectic in the morning, and it is hectic when you've got kids going to school, and if they're at different schools that's even more hectic, and if you lose a shoe or a school tie, it's all stressful. But maybe you could prepare something the night before, cut up some fruit, low-fat yogurt, that could all be mixed up. There's boxes of cereal, you've got various cereals, I don't want to name brand names or anything, but a cereal doesn't take a lot of preparation, but check the sugar content, because a lot of cereals can have a high sugar content. And we're living in Scotland, but I don't know, maybe you're watching from all over the world, and one of the best foods in the morning, and a lot of athletes train on this, porridge. So if you think about, getting some porridge oats, that's a great start to your day. But, think about things you could have. And Rhea mentioned earlier about the way you cook your foods. So if you want to have, say, an egg, try not to fry it in lots of oil. You can boil it, you can poach it, you can maybe scramble it. There's lots of different ways you can make your food healthier. But if I can, I'm going to stress to you, please, please, please have your breakfast in the morning. You'll notice that you function a lot better.
Would you recommend, a lot of people have smoothies for breakfast, would you recommend them?
Smoothies can be okay if you make them yourself. Sometimes shop-bought smoothies contain an awful lot of sugar, and as we said earlier, be a sugar detective. Read the labels, find out what's actually in that, but make your own smoothies. But to be fair, the best way to eat your fruit is au naturel. Just have the fruit the way it is. The more you cut, the more you pulp it down, the more vitamins, the more minerals you're losing. So if you can, if you are going to be making smoothies, try and make them as healthy as you can.
Great, thanks for that. Christina's asked another question about mayonnaise. So obviously not, could be related to breakfast I suppose, but probably not. Can you suggest a healthy recipe for mayonnaise, as I like mayonnaise type fillings for baked potato and like to cut down on calories that normal mayonnaise has?
Now, you can make your own mayonnaise, but it's quite difficult. Now, I'm not the best at food, and talking about how to make and prepare, Ria's much better than me at this, so I'll hand you over for that one to Ria.
So as Alison says, you can make your own mayonnaise. There'll be lots and lots of recipes online. We can definitely try and find one for you if you want to message us. But as she says, it can be a little bit difficult because what can tend to happen is a few of the ingredients, if you don't add them just at the right pace, it can make the whole thing split. And then you can't really save it after that, you've got to start again. So it can be quite costly if you're trying to make your own. I've noticed actually not long ago when I was in the supermarket, I've just actually stocked up on some mayonnaise, and I've noticed that the cream cheese and the mayonnaise, you get your things like Philadelphia or your Hellmann's mayonnaise, or even your supermarket own brand mayonnaise, they all have lighter versions. But now with things like cream cheese and mayo, I've noticed that they've kind of got lighter and then lightest. So they've come up with even lower fat versions of these. Initially you maybe just got your full fat or your light version. So they are obviously mindful that people are looking to get the lowest amount of fat when they're choosing these products. So have a little look and just go for your lightest option, the one that's got the least amount of fat in there. I like mayonnaise on things like salad and sandwiches. But also be aware of the amount that you're using. So, stick to a teaspoon, or, measure it in a way that you can visually see how much you're maybe putting on. Know that I'm going to stick to a teaspoon of this, and that's my portion, if you will. Maybe don't just free pour it, across your sandwich or across your salad. You could use measuring cups or measuring spoons if you've got them, or just your average teaspoon, just so that you know I've definitely had that amount and I know that, and that's easy for you to kind of manage.
Great. And one question from Kirsty asking about porridge. Are flavoured sachets okay, or would you stick to traditional oats?
It's actually a personal choice. I know you can be busy in the morning and porridge can take a little bit of time to make. But again, just look at what the sachets are saying. As Ria was talking about, read the labels, because some will have less sugar in them than others. So it really is important, again, to read the labels. And that's given me an idea for a session, because we've actually got cards, and they're quite big laminates that we could let you see about the traffic light system, about what the kind of foods you should be eating, and eat less of, eat more of, be aware of, the amounts that you should be doing. So it's the red, the amber and the green. So we'll bring those in for a session in weeks to come, because it seems to be coming up quite a lot about labels and what's the best food to be eating. But we're not here today to say stop eating this food, that food or the next food. Everything's in moderation. So if you can just think about reducing the amount of saturated fat you're taking, the amount of sugars, etc., that's a good thing. Okay, I think Ria's going to talk about salt.
Yeah, my next one is salt. So again, I'm telling you about all the things that you need to reduce. So about 75% of the salt that you eat will already be in your food, and I know that salt is a massive thing for a lot of people to add to their food. They have to have it. They'll say they don't like the taste of things without salt. A lot of the time it can just be habit. If you've always added sugar to your tea, or you've always added salt to your food, you tend to get used to that, and it's about breaking that habit like anything else. And as Alison has said a couple of times, part of that might just be reducing the amount that you use. If you have 2 sugars in your tea, try and go to 1. If you know that you use a lot of salt, just try and reduce that. So we've got, most people tend to have this in their cupboard. What I'll also say is there's a lot of hidden salt in things, so you have to be aware of that. And again, it all comes down to your label reading. So Alison said it might be a good idea to do a wee session on reading labels. There's actually quite a lot involved. There's a lot of information that we can give you about that, things to look out for in the list of ingredients and things that will make it easier for you to understand what's in your food. So things like your gravies and your stock cubes, make your own. Don't buy tubs of gravy, there'll be a lot of salt in it. If you're buying things like your stock cubes, go for your low salt options. Like your fat and your sugar, you get low salt options of lots of different foods in the supermarket. Things like your bread, your cereals, think Alison mentioned cereals. A lot of these things you wouldn't think would contain things like salt and sugar, but they do. And again, it's just about reading the ingredients to find out exactly how much that they contain. Anything else?
Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
Oh, sorry, can I just mention one more thing? Just while you're cooking, remember to taste your food. So don't just throw salt in just because you know that you usually do. So don't be afraid to taste food that you're cooking from scratch. We were talking earlier on about how it's nearly winter. People will be making things like soups and stews and things like that. So you will be using stock. You might be using salt. So try to think of other ways to flavour your food as well. So use things like your dried herbs, your spices, black pepper, anything that can make it taste really nice without adding in extra salt. And the same, after you've plated your food up, have a taste of it before you put salt on. Does it really need the salt, or are you just adding it because you know that that's what you usually do?
Okay. Right, I think I had a comment from Christina earlier, and I think it was about, she was hoping to maybe lose some weight. Well, one of the things that we can do is look at the plates that we're using. So, as you see before me, there's two different sizes of plates here. So if I was to give you this plate with a certain amount of food on it, and it was only half full, you'd be saying, oh my goodness, I'm not getting a lot of food from Alison today, I'm not really very happy about that. So maybe if you take the big plate away and use a smaller plate and put the same amount of food that would be on that, this plate's going to look fuller, and a lot of the time it's to do with what you're seeing and what you're thinking. So you can believe that, oh, that plate looks really, really good, and I might give Ria this plate full of food with a baked potato with healthy fillings and nice salad around it. I'll put the same on this plate and give it to Robin. He'll give me a funny look and say, my goodness, you've given Ria far more food than me, what's that all about? And I'll say, well actually Robin, it's actually just the size of the plate. So have a think about reducing the plate sizes. Some plates you get are even bigger than this one that I've got in front of me, and I class them as bin lids. So they're massive big plates, so if you can, ditch the big bin lids and go for something a lot smaller. And I think now Ria's going to talk about
fruit and veg. So I mentioned earlier on, I think it was at the start, that about a third of your food intake should come from your carbohydrates, from your starchy foods, so your bread, your pastas, rice, potatoes. So the other food group that you should be getting a lot from is your fruits and your vegetables. I know that we are told to aim for 5 portions a day, and again it might be that we do another session on things like portion sizes, because a lot of people will say, well, what's a portion, how much is that? So if you're talking about things like an apple, a banana, a decent sized orange, so we've got these here, so that's your orange, we've got an apple, 1 banana, that's all 1 portion. If you're eating something like strawberries or raspberries, blueberries, that kind of thing, raisins, maybe about a handful, whatever is a handful for you, we would call that a portion. And everything counts, so things like your 100% fruit juice, if it's 100% fruit juice, that would count as a wee portion of fruit and veg. Whether your fruit and veg is frozen or tinned or fresh, it all counts. And you want to make sure that a lot of your diet is made up of fruit and veg, because it fills you up. It means that you're getting a good intake of fibre, which keeps your gut and your bowels really healthy. And it also gives you a lot of the vitamins and minerals that you need. And without the vitamins and minerals, your body can't actually absorb a lot of the other good things that you're taking in from other foods that you're eating. So you actually need those, otherwise you're not actually getting anything from other foods. So that are really, really important. What I'll also do is put the link up on this post for the Eat Well plate. So you can see that online, and it's a picture of a plate, and it's divided up into different sections, and it gives you a little bit of information about how much of each of the food groups should make up your diet. So if you imagine a plate in your mind, just like the ones that Alison has there, a third of that plate should be your starchy foods, roughly a third should be your fruit and veg, and then you've got the rest made up of little sections, so that would be your proteins and your fats and lots of other things that we'd get from a balanced diet. So it's a good way to educate yourself on how much you should be taking in as well. I think that was everything I had to mention about that.
Just last comment was from Christina, just saying thank you so much community health team, your advice and tips mean a lot at a time when my weight management group sessions can't operate due to COVID-19 restrictions. So that's great. I suppose it was a question I asked you earlier around fruit and veg, and a lot of people would say it's quite expensive to buy fruit and veg. What would you say to that?
Do you want to go there?
I was just going to say that, again, it depends what you've got access to, and I drive, so I definitely find it easier to get around, than someone who maybe doesn't drive or who doesn't have access to transport. But I definitely like to have a wee look around for fruit and veg. Some supermarkets, the prices will vary, the quality will vary. You might find that going for big bags of frozen fruit and veg works out a lot cheaper, so have a look in the freezer. A lot of people don't think to look there, especially for fruit. You get so many different kinds of fruit that's frozen. What I also tend to go for, if I know that I'm making things like a smoothie, I know we've mentioned smoothies a couple of times, I won't buy the normal pack of raspberries. A lot of supermarkets will give you offers in the discounted section, so if it's stuff that's going out it's a lot cheaper, so buy that instead if you know you're just throwing it into a smoothie, or go for some of the supermarkets are making use of the wonky fruit and veg as well. So I often go for the wonky raspberries or the wonky carrots. If you're doing something like a soup, it doesn't need to look nice, so it doesn't matter that your carrots look a bit, a funny shaped or whatever. So have a wee look for those options as well. I know that there are various areas, and maybe not right now, just with everything going on, but various areas across the city have things like community gardens. Some of the centres and things will do things like soup packs, and they'll give away recipes and just different ideas for things to do with fruit and veg as well. So if you want information on what's available in your community, you can let us know. Like I say, it might be a bit different just now, just with the current situation, but there are usually local places that you can get things from as well, just to help a little bit. Was there anything else you were going to mention?
No, just exactly what you're saying. The supermarkets have deals on. I know certain supermarkets do their Super 6, and if you go into the supermarket when they're doing their Super 6, you can get fruit and veg at a really, really low cost. So it's just a case, as Ria says, keeping your eyes open and seeing, who's got the best deals on. And if you know a shop that's got the best deals on, make sure you get there and get them.
And I suppose another thing I've noticed in supermarkets is the pre-packaged sort of fruit and veg. If you buy carrots that are loose or carrots that are in plastic bags, or you sometimes get stir-fry vegetables that are in plastic tubs, that they tend to cost more than buying it loose. Would you say that's the case?
I sometimes find the opposite. So right. What I sometimes find is it's cheaper to buy a big bag of something, but what you've got to weigh that up with is, are you going to use all of that? Is it going to end up food waste? Are you going to end up chucking it out? So Alison had mentioned preparation earlier on. If you're planning out, maybe you're doing a weekly shop, or you're planning out what you're going to have, each night for your tea even, and I do this. If I know I've got a massive bag of carrots, I try and think of 2 or 3 things throughout the week that I can use carrots in, or can I make a big load of something and put it in the fridge or the freezer, so that they're not sitting there throughout the week and they're going off. So a lot of it is about planning, making sure that you're using everything that you're buying, otherwise it's a waste of money and it's contributing to food waste as well. So I think there's something there about it is difficult, because sometimes a loose product might cost you that little bit more, but even if you spend less and you get more in a big bag, if you're putting half of it in the bin anyway, are you really getting more for your money because half of it's going in the bin? So you've got to kind of think about it that way, I think, as well.
And it's a case of being creative with some of the food you've got as well. If you look in your fridge or in your cupboard and you see that your carrots are going a little bit bendy and they're not looking as fresh as they were, maybe get them into a soup as quick as you can, and use them up that way. Okay.
Great, yeah. And just so Christina's just asked, do you have any other advice you can give me in the run-up to upcoming gastric bypass surgery? So I suppose that you can if there's something specifically you want to know, Christina, you can send us a message on our Facebook page and we can find out what is the best way to get that information to you. So we've got community health nurses in our team as well that might be able to give you some advice. So just get in touch and we can answer any questions you have after the session.
Yeah. There was just one other thing that we were going to go over, and it was about alcohol. It was to limit your alcohol. And if you don't know the guidelines of what the safe limits for alcohol is, it's for both men and women, it's the same. It's 14 units per week, so that's 2 units per day. And if you want to know what a unit is, that would be a half pint of lager, it would be a small glass of wine as a unit, it would be a 35ml of a spirit. And really what you want to think about alcohol as well, it's got something that we call negative calories. What was it again, Ria? There's no good calories within it.
Empty calories.
Empty calories.
Empty
That's the
calories.
word. We forget words sometimes. So empty calories. So you're actually taking in calories that are giving you no nutritional benefit at all. So you're actually better to avoid alcohol. And with alcohol, you maybe know that if you have a few drinks, you might get a case of the munchies and you want to eat something. Now, long ago, it used to be that you couldn't just, go on your phone and order food in. You would have to maybe trip away down to the shop to go and buy it. Everything's a problem now because it's so easy to get food. You do not even need to get off your chair. You just got to pick up a phone and put in a couple of numbers, and hey presto, a Deliveroo or someone will come arriving at your door with whatever food you've chosen. So be careful with alcohol because, as we say, it's got empty calories. I think it can also lead to a lot of weight gain as well, so to be very careful with the amount of alcohol. But I think what we maybe should do just now is sum up. Would that be okay to do that? So I'll just quickly go through what the tips were. So we give you tips about basing your meals on starchy foods, drinking plenty water, oily fish, trying to be active and get to be a healthy weight, cutting down on your saturated fat and sugar.
Not skipping breakfast, so making sure that you get your breakfast, trying to eat less salt, trying to eat more fruit and vegetables, limiting your alcohol and being mindful of things like your portion sizes, your plate sizes, and going back for seconds and things like that.
Okay, well, thank you very much everyone for tuning in today. Ria and myself and Robin have enjoyed our second Facebook Live session, and please do get in touch with us. Contact details just via the Facebook site.
You can message us on Facebook or you can leave a comment on the video as well, and we have a website as well.